session on a famous verse of the it's not in the Bhagavatam exactly. It's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's a verse which was spoken by Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami. But originally this verse is found in the Hari Bhakti Sudadaya. And it was a verse which was spoken by Dhruva Maharaj. And this evening we're going to continue from that verse, if we're able, taking the pastime from Srimad Bhagavatam. Last night we read from the Chaitanya Charitamrita as a lead-up, a build-up to this verse, which is basically speaking, leading up to the fact that only pure devotional service is of any real value. We put value on pretty much everything. Maybe it's of no value to us at all, but we put some measure on it. A pure devotional service to Krishna is unlimited. You can't measure it. It's not subjected to relativity. Every other form of, or every other goal, in fact, which people set in their lives is destined to fail. Maybe for a short time it appears to be successful, but in the longer run there is no success in the material world, because everything comes to a dead end. We call a road which has no way out a dead end. A dead end. You sometimes go down a dead end, isn't it? You didn't realize it until you get there. Then you have to turn back. So a material world's like that. It's a dead end, literally a dead end. Whether you're a billionaire or a pauper, it ends up a dead end. Whether you're a Brahma, or whether you're a Rakshasa, or whatever, a ghost, everything ultimately ends up a dead end. A bird, a beast, a leaf, a flower. Everything in this world has its beginning and end. So, whatever it is we heard yesterday, even if you do have these material desires, better worship Krishna, because it may take time, it may take a long time in fact, but by worshipping Krishna, or at least approaching Krishna, that gradually one will become purified of these desires. It's not so much, we want to get purified of our reactions to our sins. Actually, material desires, by the way, is also a reaction to a sin. It's subtle and it turns into gross, manifest grossly. We generally want to get free of the reactions to our activities, not so much the desires that cause them in the first place. But one who's serious, they want to get free of the cause, which is the material desire. Of course, material desire is based, it's not just self-manifesting, it's based upon our animosity towards Krishna. The soul can have two kinds of desire. One desire in one sense, but you could look at it in two ways. We can desire to serve Krishna, or we can desire not to serve Krishna. If we desire not to serve Krishna, then there are certain choices, but the living entity is then placed into a situation that of the material world. But we don't have any direct material desire, we just don't want to serve Krishna. We want to be served. We want to see ourselves in the center. We can look at it another way. The devotee puts Krishna in the center. The non-devotee puts themselves in the center. So the material world is comprised of living entities who desire to put themselves in the center. So Krishna arranges this environment under the influence of his external potency, where the living entity sees himself in the center. But unfortunately, you could say unfortunately, the living entity doesn't understand its actual nature. In order to live or exist separately from Krishna, Krishna provides this world and the various bodies therein. We start from an elevated form and then gradually become entangled in one life species after another, and ultimately become completely entrapped in the cycle of birth and death. So the process of devotional service is the process of getting out of it. And Lord Chaitanya uses Dhruva Maharaj's experience, his pastime, as a very good example of this, of how one who has material desires, who by good fortune approaches Krishna, loses his material desire, and becomes very, let's say, returns to his constitutional nature, realizing my only business is to serve Krishna. It's a very good example, and we'll be going on to that this evening a little bit. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rasa Prime Prabhu, I'm going to make a request. I make this request every single year that I come here, and I guess I'll continue making it if I still come. But this asana is not appropriate for the class. It's far too big. The asana should be sat on by everyone, irrelevant of who you're initiated by when you're giving class. There's not a question of high, low, this, that. It is for the speaking of the Shastra. It's not according to who you think you are. So you see in most places, maybe in big temples like Mayapur, where there's 2,000 devotees there. But in every moderate temple, the Vyasasana was not a Vyasasana, it's an asana. It could be called a Vyasasana because one is supposed to be representing Vyasadeva, anyone who speaks, no matter who you are. Even if you've not been initiated, you may be asked to give class. So you should sit on the same seat because it's not us, it's the seat of the speaker of the Bhagavatam, not our seat. So, I know I've mentioned that every year I come, but maybe one time some more appropriate, lower, little lower, and much smaller. So it's more appropriate and everyone can sit on it who's giving class. Otherwise it creates this kind of up-down system, which is not what Prabhupada had. So within the, let's say, okay, we'll go to the verse. This verse is not to be found in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but we read it last night, and I'll read it again. Stana vilasi tapasi stitoham tam tang praptavan deva munindruyam kacham vichinvan api divya ratnam svamin kritartosmi varangnayache. So this verse is actually recorded in a scripture called the Hari Bhakti Sudadaya, and I doubt whether you've read it. It's not a very common book. It's part of the Puranas. It's a subsection of the Naradiya Purana. And Hari Bhakti Sudadaya, which particularly deals with devotional service and particularly the various pastimes of certain devotees in relationship to the Lord, particularly those who came into contact with Narada Muni. So you can think of a few devotees that may include. One of them, of course, is Dhruva Maharaj. Any others? Pardon? Mrigari the hunter, I don't know if he's in there. Could be. I haven't read the whole book. I read some of it. A very famous one, most famous of all. Prahlad Maharaj, most famous. So these pastimes are in there, and they're explained. And of course, it was compiled maybe before the Bhagavatam, I don't know, but around that time, describing. And so this section is Dhruva Maharaj speaking in the Hari Bhakti Sutta, recorded in Hari Bhakti Sutta, no doubt spoken by Narada Muni himself. So when he was being blessed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, now we read that last night, I'm going to read it. I know this is the translation, rough as it is, from the Hari Bhakti Sutta itself, not the translation given in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but a different one. O Lord, desiring to gain the celestial road, I commenced my tapasya. I think everybody knows what tapasya means, don't you? What is tapa? It's a town in Perak. Yes, it's a town in Perak, I know it. Yes, he got on the bus to go to Tapa. No, he commenced his tapasya. Everybody knows what tapasya means? What does it mean? Austerity. From the material point of view, it means suffering. Voluntary, apparent voluntary suffering for a higher purpose. But by the unreserved grace of the holy ones, the Bhakti Sutta, of course, it's Naradiya Purana, so he doesn't mention that he was the one. It just says holy persons. By the grace of the holy ones, I have been given the rarest chance to have the gracious vision of your transcendental, illustrious, blissful divinity, which rarely can be had even by the seers and the sages. This is very rare. Very, very rare to have that opportunity to see the Lord in whatever form. What a fool I was! Alas, I was merely searching for a piece of glass, but due to providence, this is not very well written in English, that acted upon my fortune, I now could find an inexhaustible mine of gems. It's not just the most valuable gem, but it says the inexhaustible mine of gems. The most valuable gem, you could say, reduces it to a singular factor. But the gems available in relationship to Krishna are unlimited. In the material world, they are limited, isn't it? You may have some gems, but they can be counted. I don't know if you have any gems or not. But the gems of the fortune of the darshan of the Lord, or to be engaged in His service, that's a mine of gems, an unlimited mine, not just an ordinary mine. An ordinary mind is also limited, but this is unlimited, inexhaustible, unending, unlimited, mine of gems. All varieties, not just one. Everlasting gems. O Lord, owing to my stupidity and misfortune, I begged for fulfillment of worldly desires from you. We think this is success. You know, imagine if you could get all your material desires fulfilled. Wouldn't you be happy? Huh? There's a big smiling face there. Look at him. Look at those teeth. He's getting excited. How to fulfill all my material desires. What do you think? You can get high honors in your degree and first class job. You don't have to work much. Big wage, big house, nice family, wealthy, holidays all year round. Everything you want. You'll be so happy. But here he says, due to my stupidity and misfortune, I beg for fulfillment of worldly desires from you, the blissful Lord. There's an incredible description in Hari Bhakti Sudadaya of the nature of the Lord. It's also there in the Bhagavatam, written differently, but beautifully done. Who readily desired to grant me the summum bonum of all of my ambitions. Krishna was ready to give him. He was pleased with him. Okay, I'll give you what you want. Ask me what you want. We see the same thing. And can you give another example of that? That now ask for me what you want. Can you think of something else? I'm just trying to think. Who else lost their desire for sense gratification when they came in contact with Krishna? Think about it. I'll ask you at the end of the class if I remember. I do not crave for anything else, O Lord of transcendence. The beauty of your lotus feet are now the supreme object of my attraction. Therefore, I ever pray that I should not forget them. My cups are full. You ever heard that statement? The cup is overflowing. You know, I think it's in the Bible, isn't it? The cup is, you know, your heart should be overflowing in love for God, and then you have no more room for any other attention, for anything else. My cups are full. I have got no want to be fulfilled. This is why it's said that a devotee is the only person who is truly peaceful. There's nothing more to get. You know, it's just fulfillment, or say one's reached one's constitutional nature. No more wants, no more. This is what it means to be desireless. It doesn't mean you don't have any desire exactly, but you have no desire separate from Krishna. Your only desire is to serve Krishna. Should I be such a fool that when I possess a wish-yielding tree, I should beg for an empty husk? There's nothing of value in this world in reality. It's just like an empty husk, a shadow, a reflection. It looks nice, but it has no real substance. It's very tricky because it's a three-dimensional reflection, isn't it? Two-dimensional you can kind of, with a little intelligence you can work it out, but three-dimensional is a bit more difficult. It looks more real, but it's not. It's no more real than a dummy. You know, we become attracted sometimes to a dummy, but the whole world is like that, different forms. So we're going to spin on. Do you know the story of Dhruva Maharaj? Do you know the story? The historical story, let's say. Who was Dhruva? Who was Dhruva? Pardon? Yeah, the son of a king named Uttanapad. And who was Uttanapad? Yeah, the son of Priyavrata. Priyavrata is a Manu also. And he was the son of Lord Brahma. So it comes down from, he's the grandson, Dhruva's the grandson of Lord Brahma. Pretty early in the creation, I guess. Must have been. There were two sons. No, Priyavrata was his brother, wasn't he? Was it Uttama? No. His brother was Uttama. Isn't it? Uttama was his brother. Anyway, whatever. He was the son of a king who was ruling the universe practically. He was so powerful. And he was the grandson of Lord Brahma. So, the word Dhruva, what does Dhruva mean? He was given that name, Dhruva. Does it mean anything in Tamil, Dhruva? There's Dhruva, Dhruva. Dhruva, Maybe it doesn't have any meaning in Tamil. But in Sanskrit it means one who is very fixed, steady, certain, focused. Very sort of like determined. We see that in his life. He was born of a king, and he had a brother, but the king had 2 wives. Just look it up, please, so we get the names properly. I think it was, maybe it wasn't Priyavrata. Pardon? Huh? No, I'm talking about the brothers. Uttama was his brother, I think. So the king, as the king's name, I just want to get that king's name right. Look up the pastime. You can look in here. After, whoops. As we have no library anymore, so you have to use a new book from the set. Chapter 8. Probably chapter 8. And the king had 2 wives. The first wife was actually Suniti. But she only had 1 son, whose name was Dhruva. The second name of the wife was Suruchi. Suruchi had several sons. We only hear of one of them, Uttama. And maybe the king was Uttanapad and the son was Uttama. And the king was very favorable to Suruchi, but not so favorable to Suniti. So Dhruva's mother was like kind of like almost a rejected wife. And consequently he was like a rejected child. Although he was the son of the king, could have become the heir to the throne if his mother had been the most favored wife. But she wasn't. So they were kind of rejected. He didn't know that. He was a small child of 5 years old. So one day he wanted to crawl onto the lap of his father, and his father was, have you found it? His father was, you can look in the back if you can't find it. There, look in the index. But he wanted to crawl onto his father's lap, and his father wasn't against the idea, but Suruchi was nearby. Yeah, and King Uttanapad, Sarvabhauma Manu had 2 sons by his wife Shatarupa. Their names were Uttanapad and Priyavrata. Okay, they were the 2 brothers, Uttanapad and Priyavrata. They were brothers. So Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons, and Uttanapad had 2 queens. So he's, in one sense, he's the great-grandson of Lord Brahma, the grandson of Swayambhuva Manu, and the son of Uttanapad. So Dhruva Maharaj tried to crawl onto his father's lap, which is quite normal for a 5-year-old boy. But because Suruchi was nearby, she became very angry, disturbed. She was envious. She said, "You cannot sit on his lap." She pushed him off. Like that. "You can't sit there. You have no right to sit on the lap of the king. You are not born of my womb. You are born of the womb of a lowlier person." And she chastised heavily. The king was hen-pecked. He would not argue back, even though he felt a little bit disturbed. He let this happen. So King Dhruva fell to the ground and was very disturbed. He was shocked. "What is this? My father. I cannot sit on his lap." He said, "No, unless you take birth in my womb, you are not qualified." Actually, according to Haribhakti Sudadaya, according to Chaitanya Mangalosara, she said that you have not sufficiently worshipped Lord Narayan, therefore you have no eligibility to sit there. So crying, he left the palace and ran home and told everything to his mother Suniti. Suniti was very depressed. It's a fact, my dear son. We are most unfortunate. I am hardly a maidservant to Suruchi. And because you are my son, therefore you are also unfortunate. But Dhruva, being born of Kshatriya blood, didn't take that as a, oh, how wonderful, how fortunate I am, now I can become very humble and surrender to the Lord. No. He was fuming with anger. Mother Suniti tried to calm him down a little bit. She also said that your stepmother is correct, that only if you worship Lord Narayan will you be able to sit on your father's lap. And she advised him, because he said, I want to get the kingdom, I'm not just of my father, greater than my grandfather. I want to have a kingdom so great, greater than anyone's ever had. You know how children sometimes get a little worked up. You know, they want to capture the moon or something. You know, my mother said, I can do nothing. I only know that only the mercy of the Lord Narayan can achieve this. And great personalities, they go to the forest to worship Lord Narayan. So with that in mind, he was determined. But before he went, Mother Suniti said, I'm just reading a few bits. We want to learn a couple of lessons now. So you can see the spirit of a Kshatriya. They are, you know, that's the nature of a Kshatriya. They are not easily, they have tremendous desire to achieve things. My dear son, just a 5-year-old kid, my dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain. So there's a lesson to learn there, isn't there? Is there a lesson or not? What's the lesson? You may be angry. You may feel like getting revenge. Isn't it? At first he was feeling somewhat revengeful also, which is symptomatic of envious feeling. They go together, anger, envy, revenge, all in the same category. Don't inflict pain upon others. They may inflict pain upon us. But then what did Mother Suniti say? She's acting like a guru, isn't she? He's a Siksha guru to Dhruva here. Even his stepmother. Now there's a lesson to learn. Even the stepmother Surushi, she told him, you know, you have to worship Lord Narayan also. The Lord speaks through different ways, doesn't he? We have to realize that if we want to advance. Sometimes someone chastises us. Sometimes somebody speaks ill of us. It's not by chance. It's not just because they're envious or they're nonsense. That's their own problem if they are. But why are they speaking to us? Why are we hearing it? Maybe we don't hear it. Maybe we shouldn't hear it. But for our own sake, sometimes we need to hear this. And we can learn from this. The Lord is trying to teach us some lesson here. That's one thing. Whatever happens, whatever association we come into, whatever challenges we face, there's a lesson to learn. It's not just a karmic reaction, which we may try to avoid, and ultimately we cannot avoid anyway. But there's a lesson to learn. There's something Krishna's teaching us, something we need to change. Now, Mother Suniti is also saying here, don't inflict pain upon others, even if they've inflicted pain on you. Don't retaliate on your own account. Otherwise you become implicated. And you'll have to experience the same thing over and over and over again. When one doesn't retaliate, and even in ordinary dealings, someone, come on, you want to fight? You want to fight? And if you don't respond, usually it fades out. You know, they want you to react. You know, that's a test. So Mother Suniti is informing her 5-year-old Kshatriya son of this. Don't inflict pain on them. And then what did she say then? Who remembers? Pardon? Well, that was the next instruction. In the sentence I just read. She didn't exactly tell him. She said, if you want to achieve this, saintly people go to the forest. But she said something else in this sentence. And it's quite important. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from the pain. You think you might get revenge or get your own way back, but ultimately we're the one who gets the pain. It's the way the material would. Why? It's not just an ever-ending cycle of karma. The whole idea is to get us out of this cycle. If you didn't suffer any pain, there wouldn't be much incentive to stop the cycle. Pain is there, so we let go. Isn't it sometimes when we suffer, you feel, I'll never do that again? Have you ever experienced that? No. You do something and you eat something which you shouldn't. Simple example, that's a small one. And then you say, I'm never going to eat that again. But quite often we do. Don't learn our lessons very easily. Let's read something. Oh, this is what it says in Hari Bhakti Sudadaya in relationship to that statement. It's a good lesson. If we can learn one, that's good. This is Suniti speaking to Dhruva. Beloved darling, you need not lament. Good. Maybe take, I don't know if that's right. There's a lot of spelling mistakes here. Don't entertain any ill will against your stepmother. Although what Saruchi spoke was true, I bore you and nourished you on the milk of my breast. I am the legitimate wife of the king, and he begot you through my womb. Most probably, I not worship sincerely Lord Narayan, the Supreme, for which you being my son could not be so fortunate. In other words, she's saying, she didn't worship Lord Narayan sincerely, that's why you're unfortunate. So it's their fate. Therefore, do not entertain any ill feeling against your stepmother. It's our fate. In our previous births, we have not worshipped Sri Narayan, the bestower of all fortunes. So now we have to suffer and feel destitute. Whatever misfortune we will meets us, we have to endure them. So, because there's another thing. We all have our... Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. You could say we all have our allotted fortune and misfortune. You can't really change it. It's a karmic cycle. Sometimes people think in terms of this is like, what they call it, fatalism or something. But it's not. The whole idea is to rise above it, not to try to fight with it or to adjust it necessarily, but to rise above the cycle of birth and death, rise above the karma. If we have no concept of the spirit soul's existence, then it becomes a never-ending battle, trying to, do the impossible, fighting against material nature, trying to achieve various kinds of situations in this world, which we can't get even if we work as hard as anything, unless it's our fate, our karmic reaction. I mean, so many stories in that regard we won't tell. So that's interesting. So then she said, therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. So this is in the Bhagavatam. So that's a reconfirmation that she did say that. Execute the instructions of your stepmother. Is to worship Lord Narayan. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshipping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she gave him good instructions, even though you can say she was not usually looked at in a very good light. But she was also acting like his guru in that sense. And this way the Lord speaks to us, and if we really want to advance, we have to look carefully. It's not so much the situation that we find ourselves in that causes our advancement, but how we react to that situation. How we react. And I know it's very hard sometimes not to act impulsively according to our conditional nature. We tend to act very like a, I don't say like a snake or something, but you know how snakes react. If you disturb a snake, it gets pretty upset. It may even bite you. And we often do. Somebody says something and we snap back. Then we become entangled again. And again, the same thing will happen over recurring. Try to see how Krishna is trying to point out his presence. We see his presence there in every situation. So she's saying, if you want to fulfill this desire to get a kingdom greater than your grandfather, your great-grandfather, then you have to worship the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. So where to find, though? The Lord and his mother Suniti said that I hear that great saintly people go to the forest in search of God. So he resolved, his name Dhruva, great resolve. It also means one who has great resolve. He resolved to go to the forest. Now it is recommended that one go to the forest at a certain age, Panchasodvam Vanam Vrajet, to retire, to clear oneself from the material entanglements that we have. Traditionally, at least the Kshatriyas, they would go to the forest at the age of 50. Nowadays, they can be even 100 years old and they're still trying to campaign for being a prime minister. I've heard, in some parts of the world, I've heard this happens. It's their nature. They haven't risen above it. But the idea is to rise above that nature. That's the idea. It's not just to fulfill your nature, but to rise above that nature. Utilize the nature in a way to transcend it. That's how the Varnashram system was devised. So when Dhruva Maharaj then left home, and shortly after that, in looking search for God, he came across the sages. He says the sages, but it was actually himself, Narada Muni. He himself, the Lord actually advised him to go and guide this Dhruva. So he went and he met Dhruva and he gave him instructions, wise instructions. At first, he was giving him direction, which was really the Varnashram. Because in Varnashram is the God-given system where if you follow according to the duties of the Varnashram, one gradually progresses in spiritual life. It's a God-given system. At least the Daivi Varnashram, centered ultimately on Krishna. So he gave him, you're a Kshatriya. You're Kshatriyas, Naturally you're going to react, but you're a small boy. Forest is very dangerous anyway. And you attain whatever you want if you go and perform your duty as a Kshatriya. To become successful, he said, Prabhupada says, in any attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities. No, that's something else. Here's. Yeah, anyway, Narada Muni advised him to perform his duty as a Kshatriya boy. To go home, and when the time comes, then he can go to the forest, normally at the age of 50, and take shelter there in the forest. The idea of doing that, and the idea of everything, is that to become successful in an attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities, but one must be dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you just go back home and depend on the Personality of Godhead. Then later on, you can go to the forest. Krishna will fulfill your desires. Depend on him. Only Krishna can help us when no one else can. He was advising him along these lines. Quite a long dialogue is there. If one takes shelter, then when you do, if one takes shelter of Vrindavan, under Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani, certainly all the problems of his life are solved very easily. So in this day and age, we don't go to the forest, we go Vrindavan, Mayapur, holy places, the temple. Make your home a temple. Take shelter, depend on Krishna. Don't depend upon the material, insecure atmasanyasa satsapi, the fallible soldiers of this world. Depend upon Krishna. Dedicate our lives in the service of Krishna. Unfortunately, we tend to get entangled. I see that most devotees, when they retire, they end up being babysitters. Their children, especially their grandchildren, become their worshipable deities. And they spend most of their time looking after the grandchildren. Well, they're devoted, so it's okay in one sense, but it's not the ultimate purpose of life. It's an unfortunate society is, as it is, that the mother is working, so the mother's not there to look after them. So the grandparents come and do the job. What to say? But they should be retired and dedicating their life wholly and solely to devotional service to Krishna. If not in the forest, wherever they are, worshipping the Lord. So what's happening here? We see a similar thing in the Bhagavatam, maybe in the, where is it? 7th canto of Bhagavatam, right at the very beginning. When Parikshit Maharaj, 6th canto, 6th canto of Bhagavatam. In the 5th canto we hear about the hellish planetary systems, all the punishments therein, horrible things. And so Parikshit Maharaj is feeling, oh my goodness, what's the hope for people? How can they become free of this suffering? Natural quality of a devotee, he doesn't like to see others suffer. So Parikshit Maharaj was thinking like that. And Shukadeva Goswami, what did he say? How they'll become free. Anyone know? What did Parikshit Maharaj say? He asked how they can become free, and what did Sukadeva say? Beginning of the 6th canto. How can they become free of sinful reactions? Because most people are sinful. Everyone to some degree. And most people thus will be subject to suffering. So how can they become free? Pardon? I don't, maybe you're right, I can't hear. Don't be shy. Well, no, he never said that actually, funnily enough. You think he would. He didn't. He said they have to perform prayaschitta before they die. They have to perform some karmakandya atonements and then to counteract their sinful reactions. Then they won't have to go to hell. Well, most people will probably go along with that. But Parikshit Maharaj didn't. He rejected his own spiritual master, you see. But he rejected him because he said, that's not correct. Actually, Sukadeva Goswami was testing Parikshit. He wasn't that Sukadeva Goswami believed that. He was testing, and sometimes the spiritual master tests the disciple. So he was testing him. But what did Parikshit Maharaj said? I don't go with that. Because even if they do atonement, they do the same thing again. They may get freed of the sinful reaction, but they do the same thing again and again and again and again. They don't learn their lessons by that method. And we see that in their daily lives, that people don't learn their lessons very easily. This type of lesson. So then, okay, very good, Sukadeva Goswami said. And then he started teaching about the holy name, how to really become free. Sri Narada Muni, the supreme spiritual master, is testing Dhruva Maharaj to see how determined he is to prosecute devotional service. This is the process of accepting a disciple. So this is a very important lesson here. He's telling Dhruva, Varnashram, go back home. Your father is suffering like anything. He's regretting everything that's happened. He wants you back. He'll give you the kingdom. He'll do anything to get you back. Even Mother Saruchi is crying and crying that you've left home. He thinks you're dead. And he's really feeling sick. Please go home. We'll leave him. Like that. And then you'll get what you want. Just depend upon Krishna. Don't worry. But no, Dhruva would hear nothing of it. He was determined. I haven't come to the forest to hear this. I want to find God. He was so determined. Dhruva. So Narada Muni was testing him. He's the supreme spiritual master in the universe. Practically. He's testing Dhruva. This is the process of accepting a disciple. The great sage Narada has come to Dhruva under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just to initiate him. Yet he is testing Dhruva's determination to execute the process. It is a fact, however, that for a sincere person, devotional service is very easy. But for one who is not determined and sincere, the process is very difficult. What do you get from that paragraph? What do we learn from this? Sorry we haven't got it on the board or anything. It'd be easier for you to remember. But what do you remember anything from that paragraph? Pardon? Duplicity? Simplicity? Yeah, maybe. You could say that. But what do the paragraphs say? Well, that's nice. You could say that too. But what did the paragraph? The paragraph means the last 5 lines which I read. What did it say? I'll read it again. Sri Narada Muni, the Supreme Spiritual Master, is testing Dhruva Maharaj to see how determined he is to prosecute devotional service. This is the process of accepting a disciple. You have to be determined. The great sage Narada has come to Dhruva under the direction of the Supreme Lord just to initiate him. Yet he is testing Dhruva's determination to execute the process. He's testing his determination. It is a fact, however, that for a sincere person, devotional service is very easy. But for one who is not determined and sincere, the process is very difficult. Oops. It is the duty of the spiritual master to test the disciple to see how seriously he desires to execute devotional service. Then he may be initiated. Do you know what initiation means? What initiation means? It means taking the Guru Disciple course, passing the test, right? Getting a recommendation from your mentor friend, if you're a good boy or girl. Telling everyone you're following 4 regulated principles for a certain period of time, although no one can prove it. Telling everyone you're chanting 16 rounds. Hopefully you are. Minimum. At least in Iskcon, it may be different in different lines. That's Iskcon. And then sitting down in front of a fire, isn't it? Cooking some bananas. No, hopefully it's more than that. Hopefully it's not just cooking bananas. And getting a new name, right? And some new set of beads. Nice. Now you're initiated. Is that what it means? What does it mean?
Prabhupada says that you're finished with material life.
Well, sure, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Finished is the beginning of the finish. I mean, you know, sometimes you say, you know, come to an end. You've got a line and a beginning to end, but there's the beginning of the line. It's also the end, but it's the beginning of the end. It's not the end of the end. Initiation means beginning. It's the beginning of that process. It's not. Sometimes we think it's the end, but it's the beginning. Officially, it's the beginning. The test before is there. The spiritual master tests in Iskcon. We test 4 regulated principles for so many months, and this, that, the other. Some test is there. It must be a test to see how sincere we are, how determined we are. That test is there, and if one is deemed determined and sincere, he may be initiated. What is traditionally initiation? What is that initiation? What are we talking about here when it says initiating? Is it what we just mentioned, or is it something different? Traditionally, initiation meant that one received diksha, mantra diksha. Mantra diksha is the mantra which then you receive from the spiritual master who gives it. And then one performs that activity of chanting that mantra along with any other, other aspects to support it in behavior. In the Krishna consciousness in this day and age, practically no one can do that. Practically no one can chant the mantra, Jai Jagannath, Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. Very hard to concentrate, very difficult. Some of you are Brahmin initiated. How many of you are Brahmin initiated? Hands up. Brahmin initiated Vaishnavas. Quite a few of you. You know how it's not easy to focus, is it, on the Brahmin mantras, Gayatri mantras? You ever noticed that? Not easy, huh? Isn't sometimes a little more than others? It's not the Yuga Dharma. Narada Muni gave Dhruva the mantra. They're normally secret mantra diksha. It may not be secret in terms of no one else knows about it, but it's not meant for public worship. It's received from the disciplic succession. This verse we often hear, if you don't receive your mantra from the parampara, it'll have no effect, is referring to this type of diksha, not the Hare Krishna mantra. It refers to this, when you receive your diksha mantra. Diksha mantra. That is only can be received, only effective if one receives it from the right source, from the bona fide spiritual master. So he gave them a mantra, 12-syllable Krishna mantra, for worshipping the Lord. And we chant it every day because it's in the Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That was his mantra, which he received. And then appropriate practices to go along with it, to fulfill it, along with the mantra. It said that one should also perform austerities. Not just chant, but austerities must be there too. And along with that, there must be worship as a form of God, deity form, for those who are neophytes particularly. Dhruva was more or less a neophyte, so worshipping, made a deity out of earth and water of Krishna, according to the description given. Like that we have deity worship. We perform devotional service. We are lucky by good fortune, initiated or not initiated, by the way, the Mahamantra will work. The holy name works. And the real initiation, in one sense, in a movement, is when we accept in our heart, in the heart, not just externally, when we accept in the heart that devotional service under the direction of the pure devotees is our life and soul. Our life and soul. The real initiation is when we accept that in our hearts. That's the sincerity, I could say. Determined to fulfill the order of the spiritual master. Okay, well it's getting late. It's 8:50, and if we're here next week, we'll carry on with Dhruva Maharaj's journey back to Godhead. So he's been initiated now. There's no ceremony traditionally, particularly involved. We have in Iskcon quite extensive ceremonies to help create strong samskaras, impressions on our hearts, so we take it seriously, and to attract others to the process of surrender. Initiation is the process of surrender. And as you said, giving up, someone said, giving up our material, namaha, maha, our false ego, na, negating it, namaha, om namaha, giving it up. So we approach nama om, the word namaha is to negate the material false ego. If one offers one obeisances properly, it's said that also is very powerful in negating this false ego, which sees ourselves as the enjoyer, sees ourselves in the center. And that's another aspect of devotional service. Accepting and also giving up simultaneously. Letting go. Any questions? You had questions last night. Anybody else? Any questions? Who's there? Oh, you made it. Well done. I threatened Shamsundari last night. I gave her a hard time. She was scared stiff. Yeah.
My question is in relation with...
Sorry, when what?
My question is in relation with, like Dhruva Maharaj's father, he had to actually, being a leader, and at the same time he had to make a decision to choose between two. One who is also deserving, and another one where the biasness is already there, that okay, that person is the one to be actually chosen to sit on the father's lap. So even through my experience also Guru Maharaj, like being in a position, a leadership position myself, I have to come across this kind of situation where I had to choose between one who is truly deserving to take up a certain service or a certain project, and another one which is actually favorable or have been biased by other people in the organization itself. So one part of me, I do not want to do that, to have that sin of like not choosing the person who is deserving, but at the same time I also had to listen to others. Okay, no, they actually, instead of choosing person B who is deserving, they want person A. So in this kind of situation, Guru Maharaj, what is your advice?
Sometimes it's difficult to make decisions. Well, there are, when you've got these choices, in the case of King Uttanapad, but the let's say the framework which he made his decision was wrong. He had to make a decision, but he based it on the wrong framework. It was based on favoritism. It wasn't based upon necessarily dharmic principles, or in the case of an ordinary situation, the rules of the business or whatever it may be. There are always certain parameters involved. It shouldn't be based upon one's own likes and dislikes, although it will be in most cases. That's why there's a problem in this world. This world is not utopia. People make decisions based upon their own perception, their own sense gratification, etc. So it's inevitably going to be wrought with fault, inevitably. But as much as possible, that's monitored within the framework. It may be honesty among thieves, but nonetheless, there is a certain framework there which determines on what basis you make the decision. It's not based upon, oh, I like his hairstyle, and I'll give him the job rather than him, because I wouldn't want to sit in an office with him. I don't like his hairstyle. That's not the right basis. Or I don't like her because I remember you know, she had a relationship with this boy I didn't like, or, you know, this is not the right basis for making decisions. Or because she happens to come from somewhere and I don't like that place, or whatever it is, some discrimination which is not appropriate. It's according to the situation, the needs of the service, the needs of the situation, the eligibility of the person to fulfill those needs. It won't be a perfect decision, you do your best. But in the case of King Uttanapad, his decision was dependent upon his being henpecked by one of his queens, which shouldn't have been the case. In his heart, he wanted Dhruva to sit on his lap, but his wife didn't want it, and he surrendered to his wife. So that's not the right motive for action. It's not the right motive. But these things happen. It happens throughout the course of history and will always happen because it's the material world, and it's the material world is the world of duality. It's a world of imperfection, especially in our day and age. It's a world of quarrel, hypocrisy, and you name it. So decisions will be like that, and it's very difficult to make decisions without upsetting somebody in many cases. It's a fact. When a good person is described also, King Uttanapad was a very good person, but he was a little bit, let's say, materialistic. Otherwise, he was a devotee of the Lord, a very good leader, a very qualified person. And he very much repented. This is the difference between a good and not so good person, or let's say conditioned soul. He was very sad and sorry for what he did. And we see this example coming up many times of this feeling of repentance. Now, not that every time you make a decision and somebody doesn't get the job, you start to repent. That's another thing. But in terms of when we know we made a mistake or we based our decision on the wrong premise, then one will feel very repentant. Just like Parikshit Maharaj felt repentant when he decided to put the dead snake on Kaushik Rishi, because the sage had ignored him, and he reacted by putting a dead snake around his neck, and then he left in disgust. But then he repented and felt very bad about what he did. And this is the sign of a good person. In other words, this is a lesson. The whole purpose is back to our original point, that the purpose of the material world is not just to make utopia here. You will not be able to find utopia in this world. The purpose is to get out of this world. So mistakes are also part, in many cases. They're not made, if they're not made, let's say, with a vindictive mentality that one puts someone in trouble or purposely causes them pain. You didn't want to. You just have to do your duty as best as you can, and you certainly didn't want to hurt anyone. We were reading something very profound the other day. I've forgotten what it was in this regards. Somebody, oh yes, it was in regards to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he returned to Navadvip, and then he went to, where did he go to? Some village near, maybe Ramkeli, I'm not sure. He went somewhere, and he stayed in the house of, the devotee's name I've forgotten. But he stayed in the house of one of his devotees, and he wanted to be quiet, so he was hiding him. Then everybody found out. They all came there. In the middle of the night, Lord Chaitanya left that place and went elsewhere. And all the devotees were very, very, very disturbed. They thought that this devotee was hiding him and not allowing them to have his darshan. But he was trying to assure them, no, the Lord has gone to another place. I don't know where. They wouldn't believe him. They were all cursing him and calling him ill names and so many things. He had to tolerate this. It was very painful, very difficult to tolerate. Yes, he'd gone to Katwa. He'd gone to Katwa. And he was feeling, it was very difficult to bear. And, how do I come onto this? I'm not sure, but it's an interesting story anyway. And it was very difficult for him to tolerate. And eventually, of course, he found out where the Lord had gone. And he went there and asked the Lord, please, to relieve him of this, being cursed or being criticized by everyone. His name was like become mud. So then the Lord said, yes, okay. So then he went back and told everyone, everybody went to Kuala, and he was relieved. So whatever happens, sometimes we go through these difficult situations. People don't understand why we say what we're doing. We made a decision, whatever it is. But a good soul, he depends upon Krishna, doesn't wish harm to anyone. But you have to do one's service in devotional service, sometimes making a decision. Not everyone appreciates it, but we know ultimately, if we're really trying to depend on Krishna, that Krishna's seeing our sincerity, and he's not going to abandon the devotee or punish the devotee for making what appears in people's minds a wrong decision. Prabhupada said that about Satsvarup Maharaj. He said, you're not a good manager, but you're perfect because you do what I ask you to do, even though you don't do it very well. And it's not a question of being perfect, it's a question of depending on Krishna, of trying to perform one's duty for the pleasure of Krishna to our best capacity. And that's the real thing, that we're trying to do it for Krishna, and not just trying to be perfect from the material perspective. But if one sees it from the material perspective, then certainly one will see faults. One will see faults. So many faults. Because everyone sees it differently. Everyone has a different opinion. So this is what the problem in the world is today. People don't see it in relation with Krishna, they see it in relation with each other, and they fight. They quarrel. They disagree. They go into political parties and what have you. Because they're missing the point of it all, which is to see Krishna. The purpose is to put Krishna in the center of our lives. To see everything in relationship with Krishna. But that's unfortunately the way it is in this world. And for a devotee, he understands that nothing is perfect. You do your best, you try to do the best you can, but nothing is perfect in this. Every endeavor is covered by fault. You can never satisfy everyone, no matter what you do. But by satisfying Krishna, one automatically everyone benefits. So we try to satisfy Krishna. Anything else?
Maharaj. There are some devotees who sing Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya as a form of kirtan.
As a form of kirtan?
Yeah. So what's your opinion of that?
I don't have too much of an opinion on it. Some devotees do this. Why do they do it? That's the question. Everything depends a lot on motive, not just on what you do. And that applies to many things. It's the attitude or the motive behind it. So one have to ask, why would one do that? And we do chant Om Namo Bhagavate before most classes, especially Bhagavatam, because that's the invocation mantra to Srimad Bhagavatam. Why do devotees do it? Now, does anyone know? Do you know?
I think it was an outreach program. They just one of the repertoires.
Well, yeah, but why? I mean, repertoire, you could say, okay, it's a Vedic mantra. It's a Vedic mantra. It's not, the Hare Krishna mantra is not a Vedic mantra. It's transcendental. So why are they chanting a Vedic mantra? We chant probably a few other Vedic mantras too. I've heard devotees chanting more than just Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya at outreach programs. Sometimes they compromise, they're chanting Ganesh mantras, Shiva mantras and different things, which is probably a lot more questionable than Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Why do they chant it? Well, think of something. Okay, maybe it's not the reason, but think of some reason they might chant it. Why would someone do that in an outreach program, or any program come to that? Sometimes we chant it a little bit more than 3 times or so. Why? Think of some good reasons, and maybe some bad reasons also. Can anyone think of a good reason why you would do that? What's that?
She said the tune is nice. She said the tune is nice.
The tune? The tune? Yeah, you might like the tune. Now, is that a good reason or not? Not particularly. It might, well, you see, there's 2 levels here. And this is in Kirtan, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes this external and internal. Externally, the tune The musical instruments, the dress, the paraphernalia, everything is involved in attracting people. So taking that a step further, the tune may attract people. It may attract people. Why do we do yajnas in public, at least? Maybe there's a little importance of establishing an impression in our heart, but otherwise they're not necessary. They have an attractive feature. They attract people. They attract. So some people are attracted like that, by the tune, by the melody, by the mantra itself. And people can relate to it. So that's a negative and a positive reason. Negative if you think that's the reason is simply I like the tune. But positive if it actually attracts others to come into the association of devotees. It is a mantra, it is a Krishna mantra, and if chanted with a pure heart, obviously has a benefit on those who hear it. Well, that's kind of positive. Any other reasons they may chant? We've got a few there in one sentence. One. Mantra may. It may, yeah, well, yes, if it does. It may be that's your bhav. You know, I mean, you'll find different mantras help you to remember Krishna more than others, probably. Different pastimes help you remember Krishna more than others at this particular stage of one's life. So maybe some people do feel more remembrance of Krishna when they chant that. You see, a lot of people at these, especially outreach programs, they kind of like, I don't think it's the case, but a lot of people say it is the case, that they like variety. You know, and if you just chant Hare Krishna all the time, they think you're kind of like pretty narrow-minded, you know, into your own thing. But when then some devotees vary the mantras a little bit, so Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya. You hear them, these mantras. What's his name? Radhika Ranjana. If you know him, Radhika Ranjana from London. He's the most famous right now in the world of kirtan, at least out there. And he does, you know, go with the Jai Jai or Sitaram Vagupati Raghava. And he'll sing, you know, different mantras which attract people. And then bring in Hare Krishna, get them to chant. So it's a technique. You have techniques in preaching. We have to be careful we don't get attracted to the technique and not the objective behind it. Or we become attached to an institution and not the objective behind it. We're not here to become institutionalists. The institution is here to awaken our love of Godhead. So the real purpose of chanting is to please Krishna, but from our point of view, to awaken our love for Krishna. If you're not doing that, then you have to see by the results also, and the motive, why a devotee is doing it. Is he doing it to attract attention to himself or to Krishna? Oh, Prabhu, you sing so nicely. Wow, those are really nice tunes you've got there. So what is the motivation? That applies to every type of service, no matter what it is. And what's the result? Are people's hearts changing, or are they just entertaining? Is it entertainment, or is it with a genuine intention of trying to please Krishna, awaken Krishna consciousness? You can't judge absolutely on these things. But a general paradigm is that this is the what do they say, the rod? What is it? How you decide things? There's a word I've forgotten. But would we do it in front of Prabhupada? Would we do it? That's a good measuring rod. Would we do it in front of Srila Prabhupada? We don't perhaps use it very often, but would we? You can't guarantee they're there, but we think like that. Would we do it? Some things we would, some things we wouldn't, probably. Prabhupada, you know, he was tolerant of the children, enthusiasm and so on. He himself, in many places, would just chant Govinda Jaya Jaya because they were used to that, in Gujarat particularly. Sometimes he would chant round the other way, Hari Ram, because that's how people chanted. Sometimes he would break the words down, but generally not. Generally he would just chant the Maha Mantra as we know it. And occasionally Govinda Jaya Jaya. I never recollect, well he may have done, on some occasions we hear him chanting Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram, but very rarely, certain occasions, a few times. But generally he would focus on the Maha Mantra, and that's what we've been told to do. Everything is contained within the Maha Mantra. It's the safest thing. And but sometimes in outreach programs, devotees feel, maybe it works, I don't know, that a little variation is required in the tune or even in the mantra. But they should really be all Krishna mantras. We don't need it. We have so many. Don't need to go outside. Others can do that, but not. We should stick. Anything else? Otherwise, you know, it opens up the door to unending things. And I've seen many times in Kirtan, there's only the Hare Krishna mantra comes at the end after like 20 minutes of other things. Then right at the end, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, or something. Jai Om Vishnu Pad, you know, 2 mantras finished. To singing Kiba Jai Om 10 times, and so many other mantras, and then eventually you sing Hare Krishna right at the end, and then finish it. Predominantly, we should be chanting Hare Krishna. That's the main thing. If you chant other mantras, there are many other songs, mantras, and what have you to sing, but the predominant mantra should always be the Maha Mantra. Anything else?
Krishna Maharaj, very nice class.
I'm going to put my glasses on.
Question regarding Prayachita.
Prayachita?
Yes. So, as devotees, we have dedicated our lives in chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, any offenses that are not intentionally done, sinful activities, in my opinion, it would be sorted by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So is there a need for devotees to actually embark on this Prayachita journey? And if so, what needs to be done?
Can you summarize that loud and clear?
She's saying,
loud and clear.
She's saying that devotees surrender to the holy name, so there is no need for Prayachita, or is there that Prayachita necessary?
No, it's not necessary. But we do see sometimes, perhaps due to the fact that we're a little conditioned, the devotees do undergo certain chanting of other mantras, various things. Prabhupada, as far as I know, the only one he gave us was Namaste Narasingaya, which isn't necessarily a Prayachita, it's more of a protective mantra, not to, release us of some, whatever, reaction to some sinful behavior or whatever, but to protect the devotees. I don't know of any situation where Prabhupada recommended devotees to perform any other prayaschitas separately, speaking from just taking shelter of the holy name. But we see some devotees do, especially if you're from Indian descent, because you're accustomed to these things. Family pressures are there. But there's no need to do anything else. Everything is contained in the Maha Mantra. Sometimes for social sustaining family business, sometimes these things are going on, but there's absolutely no need for it. Chanting Hare Krishna is sufficient to achieve all purposes. Everything is contained within the holy name. Everything. However, if we're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra with that in mind, that I can do any damn thing and just chant Hare Krishna, then that becomes very offensive mentality. But in the course of our lives, naturally we're going to do something which upsets somebody, or we make a mistake, or we have a minor fall down of some kind, or some kind of fall down, we just carry on, and this is a recommendation of Sukadeva Goswami, is that one reinstates oneself and just continues to chant, but not with the idea that, this kind of like, almost like, what we say, using the holy name to justify my behavior, but rather to re-establish ourselves in the path of pure devotion. Automatically, Krishna takes care of whatever is required to be removed or learned from our experience we have to go through. So there's no need, but you'll see sometimes, especially in Hindu culture, that some devotees do perform some kind of ceremonies of various kinds, for whatever reason, to get rid of some this or that, some reaction, you've got some sinful reaction of some kind. Not required. If we take firm faith, if we have a sufficient faith in the holy name, there's no need. Sometimes in a very neophyte stage, we don't have much faith. We take shelter of all kinds of things. Take shelter of astrology, of Vastu, this and that. If you sincerely take shelter of the holy name, everything will be arranged. Everything. And what appears to a conditioned soul as a failure is not a failure. It's not a loss. It is actually an opportunity or a result to give us a chance to take more shelter of Krishna. More shelter. The whole purpose of life is to take complete shelter of Krishna. It's not that the result of devotional service is we get materially what we want. That's not the result. The result of devotional service is not just to counteract sinful reactions. The result of devotional service is we take shelter of Krishna completely. Under any conditions, Narayana Paraksave Akutaschana Bibhiti, Narakeshu. Whether we go to hell or Svarga, wherever we go, a devotee doesn't mind because he's Narayana Parayana, completely taking shelter of Krishna, not trying to adjust the material world. He knows Krishna will do that, so he's not worried. The devotee is not worried. Just take shelter of Krishna. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. I thought you said one round. I thought you said one round of that. I thought, oh my goodness. We'll be sat here for another 15 minutes chanting.